Okay, guys, thank you, whoever's watching this video. But we are just here sharing with one another just simple things and powerful things of God. But we hope you like what you hear. And Nathan, this is Nathan, I'm Pat, and we're just here to share the good news of the kingdom with you. Okay, Nathan?
All right. You ready to talk?
Yep, that was the intro.
Man, we're just going to go back over because we had this discussion the other day. So the kind of a really cool thing because like I've been telling you the past couple of months and stuff, God's really been showing me a real in-depth understanding on marriage and the sanctity of marriage. And we're not even going to get into all that, but through it all, he connected these dots like through the Old Testament, through creation, and where we're at now, and everything that really kind of was a eye-opening thing because the appreciation of the sanctity of marriage is a very, very huge thing, I believe, from everything I've been learning and understanding. And it's something that we overshadow and stuff just in our personal marriages. But it's a cool image because just like all this stuff, all the things that we're called to be, I mean, we can take example. It's all through the Bible. We can take example just by God's given us example of Himself, and Jesus the same way. And we take our examples from the story they laid out for us. But
Yeah, it is a story, isn't it? I mean, a lot of times we
absolutely,
get so hung up in the book, we forget it's a story.
yeah, that's how I always used to read it. You know what I mean? One book, just one book full of a bunch of smaller books, and it's completely the wrong way to read it because we miss it all. We miss the connections, and I mean it's all a layout of just. I mean the whole Old Testament is just God's. You know what I mean? Learning who God is and seeing His character through how He did everything, how He reacted to everything, how what I mean. He was just an example of Himself through through our whole walk.
And the writers, Nathan, you know this, especially in the Old Testament, the writers just I mean, they didn't get out of bed and go into a trance and write this stuff. They got out of bed or whatever part of the day and they started writing part of the story so they could pass it on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it got passed down. You know what I mean, from generation to generation. It makes it clear that I mean Moses he wrote down a bunch of stuff. Joshua wrote down a bunch of stuff. Jeremiah and I forget who his assistant was.
Isaiah did a lot of it.
Barabbas, maybe. Yeah, Isaiah. All of them wrote down these stuff, and then they got passed down. Some by word of mouth, some by written stuff, and then these prophets they put it all together. Through God's Spirit, they put it all together in a beautiful
Yeah.
interwoven way that
Well,
just I mean interconnects so much depth and interconnects it all like just absolutely
and
wonderfully.
one last side of that, even in the New Testament, they were letters. They weren't books. They were letters
Yeah.
handed down to the body of Christ, to the church. So they were passed on. It was continuation of the story.
Yeah, it'd be like just, I mean, even the letters like those. I mean, it'd be like if I was going to write you a letter
Yeah,
about stuff, stuff that God revealed to me. Paul, I mean, you can't think that Paul had everything right. He was learning just like all of us.
right.
Peter and all of them, they were learning just as all of us. You know what I mean? The same way and stuff. But if I was going to, God gave me this great revelation, like we're going to talk about today. If I was going to go write down a letter, I'm going to take all kinds of time on it and through prayer and everything and through God and stuff. And I'm going to take the time to actually put it out in a way that it's all connected and it makes sense and that what I mean the way that my spirit and God's spirit want you to read this that makes it as clear as possible kind of thing. And that's
So
what
this,
that's
no, I was
what's
going to
that.
say, so this is our technical letter, our technical video letter.
Yeah, let's talk about it because
All
that's
right.
what this just goes to show further illustrate the point because this is all the Bible. This is the Old Testament. It's so hard to understand the depth of the New Testament if you don't understand the Old Testament because
Yes.
it's all laced together. and but not vice versa. You can't, it's a lot. You shouldn't. You got to be careful about trying to interconnect or pull the New Testament into the Old Testament, because the New Testament wasn't around. It's all in how you train your mind to read this and everything.
Okay.
But anyway, for me, like I said, it was with this marriage, and I was reading through a book, and the passage of Malachi 2:15. It came up. It was illustrated in the book, so I went and checked it out because it had to do with marriage, and I hadn't seen that one yet. So I flipped open Malachi. I haven't read it in forever, so it was like all the books. If you haven't read them for forever, it's like reading them over again, brand new, especially with different
Yeah.
set of eyes, with new understandings and everything. But I just was going to read through the whole book, and I didn't even get to the verse. I didn't even get close to the verse that I was trying to get to. I read through, started with Malachi 1, and I got as far as verse 6, and it said God's talking and everything, talking to Israel again. Your eyes you see, and you shall see the Lord is magnified beyond the border of Israel. It says a son honors his father, and a servant his master. He says, if then I am the father, where's my honor? And if I am a master, where's my reverence? And I stopped right there. It caught my attention. And I guess the Holy Spirit just put it in, what I mean, in my head, like, because I started thinking, I was like, this, I started thinking, because he says, if I am the father, where's my honor? And all before this, all through the Old Testament and everything, you don't see, all through the New Testament, you see Jesus, referring to God as the Father. But through the Old Testament, God's constantly referring to himself as the bride of Israel, as he's married to Israel. Israel is his wife. You know what I mean? You get
Yes.
that kind of talk.
That's the picture you get.
Yeah, all through the Old Testament. You don't get that. Like, I started thinking about it. I was like, he calls himself the Father. He says, if I'm the Father, and I started thinking about it, because we get so used to God being called the Father, because that's the whole New Testament. Jesus, every time he refers to him God the Father. So
Father,
it's
right.
already in our head thinking that, but it stood out, and I'm like, where has it? You know what I mean? So I looked it up. I just typed in the word Father into the Bible Gateway,
Yeah.
and it pops up every verse that. And it just, I only look through the ESV, so I mean, I guarantee I missed all kinds, because it'll only give you for whatever translation you're looking up, and it's very word or
And the
phrase.
Bible Gateway, you've given it to me, and that's been great. So
Yeah,
that's good
it's
for
very word.
everybody.
Yeah, it's very word or phrase specific, but it's a really great tool. So I just typed in Father because I didn't want to get too much into it. Like 1,600
Yeah,
verses
yeah,
popped up.
yeah.
Most of them was the New Testament, but still, it put me for a couple hours just going through, and most of the like 99% of the passages that popped up through the Old Testament, they were referring to, like, the sins of the father. They're talking about
Right.
their forefathers and stuff and everything, like the original Israel coming out of Egypt. Your father's sins, and it's always talk like that. It's talking about the
Right.
fathers, and it wasn't until, like, literally, I was just reading through everyone that I thought came close. I was reading through and stuff, and it wasn't until, I don't have my little notepad with me, but I think it was like Psalm 89. I got my other uh, notebook with me, but there was like four. It was only like four or five. I think Psalm 89 was the first one that I actually found. And like I said, I'm sure I missed a whole bunch of them, but because it's just like, it just depended on the search. If you got like a more in-depth search, but I still spent a couple hours just reading through them. But I think it was like Psalm 89 where it was the first time it referred to God as being the Father, but in a different sense. There
It,
was
it is
um,
in Psalms 89. I'm there now,
yeah,
and it
there
says,
it was like, it was subtle. It was still, and then there was like Psalms 103. It was like it wasn't blatantly calling him the father. I think in all through Proverbs, there's a lot of, most of the Proverbs are referring to, like, father and a mother, and just kind of comparison to respecting your parents, kind of drawing that connection between, um, you know what I mean, honoring your parents, respecting your parents, and kind of connecting the thing, like, kind
well,
of
hey,
relating it
let me
to God.
say this in 89, Nathan. It's talking about David, okay? my servant
Yeah.
David, and right down in verse in 26, and he says, and he shall cry to me, you are my father, my
Yeah,
God,
that's what I
and
think.
the rock
That's
of
what I
my
think it was.
salvation. In
Hmm.
Psalms 89, verses 26 and 27.
Yeah, that's what I had. I had 19 through 37. Yeah, I had 26 was the one that was in parentheses, but I had
Yeah,
all
that's a big
19
one.
through 37. But yeah, that was the first one that I found where he says, you know what I mean? He says, you will cry to me. He says, you shall cry to me. You are my father. That's the first one that I found. I'm sure there's probably more, like I said, especially in the
Yeah.
Psalms, or there
Well,
might be
that's a good one to
something.
start. That's a good one to picture around.
Yeah, and but it's still not, you know what I mean. He's saying you will call to me, and I can't remember the whole context of this whole passage, because this has been a while since we had this talk and we went through this. But
Right.
not trying to get stuck on all this stuff. But that's what it's still not, you know, somebody. It's not David, or it's not, you know, Isaiah. Or it's not anybody saying God, my Father, the way that
Right.
Jesus called him his Father. You know what I mean? This is, I think, God saying, and you will call me, you know,
Yeah,
your
he's
father.
saying it to
I'm,
David, or David was
yeah, and
penning it.
there was another passage similar to that in 103, in Psalms 103, and then I think it was Isaiah. I got it down here. Isaiah 63 was the first time that it was like blatantly, where he was blatantly called. I think Isaiah calls him the Father. 63. Um, Yeah, like I said, I'm not gonna. It's not even. This isn't the main point or anything, but this is
Yeah,
just
well,
a
that's
to
all
try.
right. Just move on from that then. That we
Yeah, because I
always
don't want to get
revisit
stuck
that
on them.
stuff.
But I think it was Isaiah 63 that where he was actually, I think it was Isaiah that actually called him the Father, and then there was another in Jeremiah 3 and 4, which kind of connects it, or 3 verse 4. It kind of connects the dots, because
Well,
it goes into Mary.
here's Isaiah 63 verse 16 says, "Doubtless you are our father. Through
Yeah,
Abraham
see,
was ignorant of us, and Israel does not acknowledge us. You, O Lord, are our father."
yeah, that's what I was saying. Like that was the first one where he blatantly comes out and calls him, you know, says he's a father. And that's the first. Like I said, there might be different ones before that, but that's the
Yeah.
first one that I found where it was he was blatantly calling him the father. And
Okay.
then in Jeremiah 3:4, it does the same thing. It says in 3:4, it says says, "Will you not from this time cry to me, my father? You are the God of my youth." And it's the same kind of thing there. But there's more in there about three. We'll come back to that later.
So connect that
Um,
to our topic here then.
well, that's what I got to. So I started thinking about that and everything, and I was like, you know, at what point did did he start referring to, you know, did God start, and I've read it, I've been reading like some of the apocryphal books and stuff like that, and this was at some point through the second testimonial, or intertestamental period, they started to come to this conclusion, stuff like that. They started, their viewpoints started to change and stuff, as far as how they started viewing God as the Father and stuff. But it was just really cool because I started thinking about that, and I was like, um, it started getting me on this train of thought as far as marriage and everything like that. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, so they weren't, you know, all through the Old Testament, they didn't see God as the Father. And like I said, all the talk is, you know what I mean, God referring to Israel as his bride and everything. So this takes me all the way back to the beginning and everything, like from the start with everything. First you had, you know what I mean, Adam was created, and then God said that he, you know, it was everything was good, 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 and then he said he
Until.
created man. And then he said it was in Genesis, I think 2 something or whatever, but he says he created man, and he saw that he was alone, and it was not good. So it was the first time, and all that, everything before that was good, 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 good.
Yeah, yeah.
And he says he saw the man was alone. He said he saw the man was alone, and it was not good. So
Hey,
what he
hold
did
it.
was through man.
Let me just say this a little humorous. He didn't want God did what Adam to be was a giraffe.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so
yeah.
he thought maybe I'll take something out of Adam, huh?
Yeah, and
If
that's
I
what
take,
there's still something there's more to that. I mean, that's a whole thing you can meditate on and go into depth on thinking about that and everything as far as God was walking with them in the garden and everything, but it's not even so specific at that point because it doesn't say till after Eve came that God walked with them in the garden.
right,
So at that point, it might have just been with the creation and stuff. I mean, Adam might have been, you know what I mean? They still might have had that it's hard to say. There's not enough information there,
right,
but what it does say is that God saw it as not being good that he was alone. He wanted to, you know what I mean? He saw it that just as God's not alone in the heavens with, you know, the divine beings and the angels and everything, you know, he
right.
saw it. He saw it, you know what I mean? There's more to it there, but he saw it as not good that man was by himself. So he wanted to give man the counterpart because, you know, if you go back there, it says God in the beginning, God created man and woman. It says God created them. You know what I mean? And that's
Yes,
what as in they're one and the same kind of thing. You know, man and woman are the image. It's two sides of one being that represents the full image of God.
the
But
oneness. Yeah,
so he says, so it says that he saw it was not good, so he decided to create man. He decided to give man a helper, which is a, you know, pretty cool word he decides to use there, because like I said, this is different too, because this is before the New Testament or anything. The New Testament has never been written or anything like that,
right.
but he decides to give man a helper, as in, you know what I mean, another part of himself, kind of thing. So that's what happens. That was the original, because all this stuff started with me with Jesus when I think it was the Pharisees or something. They questioned him about marriage and stuff, and he said, you know what I mean? I think it was the verse in 19, maybe Matthew 19 or somewhere in there, where they say, I think it was that one. They say, or it might have been the one before it. There's two different places right around there, 14 and 19 or something, or 16 and 19. I can't remember, but where
Well, anybody can
um,
look up marriage and they'll find it.
yeah, they come and they ask him about um, um, the woman. She didn't have any children with this brother, this guy dies, so she marries his brother. They don't have children, so she marries the next one. 7 times over, she goes to heaven, and then they say, well, who's, you know what I mean, who's um, bride is she, and everything. And that's what he says you don't understand the scriptures or the power of God. Like, so that
And
had
they
me on
were the
this whole
religious guys.
yeah, but I mean, just the thought of that, the way he answered that right off the bat, he says, well, you don't understand the scriptures. So that tells me that the answers to what they're asking are in the scriptures, in the Old Testament. You know, when he
Right.
says the scriptures, he's always talking about the Old Testament. So the answers are
Exactly.
there. So that's where I started with all this, you know, marriage connections and stuff. But anyway, so I saw, and he said that, well, that's not how it was intended from the beginning. Is how he said. He says that's not how it was meant to be in the beginning. And talking about Adam and Eve and their union and everything. What we're talking about now, this marriage, this bond was an eternal thing, and so was God and man. You know what I mean? In the Garden of Eden, and everything like that. So you had the fall, you have, you know, the entering of sin, and blah blah blah. Everything goes to heck. So now comes in the start of the plan. You know what I mean? The plan for the restoration of Earth in itself is the ultimate thing. You know, because I believe that, you know what I mean. I believe that human Adam and Eve, they were, you know, destined, not destined, that's a bad word to use, but it was inevitable that they'd fall. You know,
Right. Right.
they had no knowledge of good and evil. So it's as easy as, you know what I mean, swaying some candy in front of a kid's face to get them to convince to do this or that. They had no
Right.
knowledge of evil. Everything was just good. Everything was what you told them. So this plan, it was going to happen inevitably, this kind of thing, because I believe that it was to equip us further as a human race and everything. But
Right.
anyway, so you got the fall and everything. Skip forward past all that. He gets Abraham, and he tells him through a nation. This is all part of this plan, this long drawn out plan and everything, which isn't so drawn out if, when you see the whole bigness of it,
Yeah,
the
the
massive
story.
picture. But yeah, the actual story. So he goes through and he picks, then fast forward to Moses, and he finally decides, because up till that point, God still doesn't have a people. He makes a promise to Abraham, but he doesn't have that
Right.
people yet.
That's right.
And so it's linked to Abraham, but it's not till Moses comes along and he says, I am that I am. Go and tell your people. These guys have no idea who their God. They have the stories of Abraham and everything like that, but they don't have any kind of personal. They don't even know their God's name. You got, what I mean. These Egyptians, they got gods for everything.
Yeah,
They
there's
got
all
names
kind of gods.
for everything. They have rituals, sacrifices. They have a very ordered way of serving their gods. Whereas the Hebrews, they have these stories, but they have absolutely no idea. I mean, if you think about it, it's try and put yourself in all these stories. Try and put yourself in the mindset of those people in that specific situation.
Right. Right.
400 years. That's what I mean. What, almost
It's a long
twice,
time.
almost twice as long as the America has been a
Yeah,
great
that's
nation.
right.
You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
They've been enslaved. Well, not enslaved that whole long, that because I think they flourished a little bit from the start. But at some point, still for those 400 years, they're in Egypt, and there's nothing other God. No. They're just kind of on their own. They
They
just
have the
further and further.
stories, Nathan. They have the stories
Yeah,
about
they have the
God,
time.
but they're not connected yet.
Not yet, and that's what there's no depth to their stuff. I would imagine that they told of Abraham, that they told of
Yes.
the
Isaac, Jacob.
Cain and Abel stories. They told of especially the Jacob story. I'm sure that was the biggest to their heart because that's how they got there. So the
Right.
Jacob story was probably closest to their heart, but they really didn't. They just had the stories to reiterate and stuff. Especially the walk of Abraham. You'd think like that whole story of Abraham's walk and Isaac and everything that was all big within them, but they didn't
Right.
even know the name of the God. So anyway, well, I'm spinning off topic again,
Yeah,
but
let's go. Let's
it
keep
just,
moving.
yeah, like I said, it's real. If you can actually, in all these stories, if you can put your mind, because everybody says, oh, well, even in the Bible, it puts such a bad image, but even when they did the golden calf at Mount Sinai, like when Moses went up on the mountain for 40 days, imagine they just came after 400 years of being here around all these other gods. This is the only way they knew to worship their gods. They
They
get
are
pulled out,
free.
all this crazy stuff's going on around them. Their God showing up out of nowhere, parting the seas and bringing in all this pestilence and all these plagues, and then all of a sudden, I mean, just absolute madness. And then all of a sudden, their leader, this guy that they're going to follow, that just brought them out of everything into what I mean, this long trek through the desert. They're hungry, they got nothing. Then he disappears for 40 days, and then they're sitting there. Is he coming back? What's he gonna do? It's like the only thing they know to do is to go back to the idols. They think that they're maybe they thought that they're serving, they'll what I mean, serve God, even though he told them not. The first thing he said, don't. I don't even know if he gave
Hey,
them the commandment yet.
well, let me say something. Moses went up on that mountain because that was the mountain of God they called, because God was speaking to him up there. So they had
Yeah.
some kind of concept that he was going up there
Oh,
to be with God,
yeah.
but they had no concept. They only reverted back to what they knew.
Yeah, they knew, and that's it. I'm not defending them or anything. I'm just saying, like, when you put yourself in the mindset, if you were one of those people, it would
Yeah,
have been easy to relapse back into that Egyptian thinking because that was their whole culture. That's all they
yeah,
knew. And now all of a sudden, their leader's gone. He says he's going up to meet with this God that just parted the Red Sea, and they just walked through the
yeah,
sea.
yeah.
Like, they did
Hello.
all this. It's absolutely crazy. So they might have been thinking that they were, what I mean, by making an idol to God, that was the way to worship Yahweh.
Yeah,
Or they might have
absolutely.
been thinking, well, we do this, we're gonna, we got to call back on these old gods. Maybe we made them mad. It's hard
Hey,
to say, but
hey,
there's
listen, son. A little offshoot from this. Isn't it similar to what Christians do today? Sometimes we offshoot our things that we think God is pleasing to God, and God's raising his hands. He says, "That's not what I want. I want
yeah,
you."
yeah, 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 yeah. It's easy to
That's a
do.
little
That's
offshoot.
No, it's easy to do. You get, like I said, to get distracted, to go back to what we know and everything. I mean, you can take, that's whole other topics and understandings. You can meditate and go completely deep in all that stuff too. But anyway, so God chooses, and we got sidetracked again, but
Yeah,
God chooses
let's
Israel.
keep
God
moving.
chooses Israel to be his people. He says he calls them to be a nation of priests. He's going to marry himself to Israel. He's going to keep them, separate them from all the other nations. He gives them a code and stuff and a law, through Moses and stuff. But the whole point of that law is that in very specific ways, it's the opposite of what the Canaanites, the Egyptians, the people around them, especially the Canaanites and stuff, the Amalekites, and what I mean,
All the
all of them, that
ites.
they're going in to repossess that land that God had promised them. So
Yeah.
he wants these people to be when the other nations around them, he wants them to stand out because they do things in a very different way. They live to a moral standard that is very different from what theirs is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So they already stand apart just by what God requires of them. And there's different levels and depths to this too, as far as being clean and God being able to reside within him and the holy space of the tabernacle and all that stuff. So there's all kinds of multiple levels to all this, but anyway, so he calls this whole body of people. It's not so much an individual thing. I mean, God's always individual with all his people. I mean, you get it with Caleb, Joshua, with Moses. I mean, it's
It's
individual, but
very individual, but a very corporate too.
yeah, at this stage in the game, it's very corporate. You know what I mean?
Right.
Israel is one people. For this way, for the trajectory of this plan, Israel is one people, and God sees them as one people.
Right.
Because there's a very specific thing that he has geared at. So
Right.
he calls this nation, and then they go through all their stuff. They finally get the land. They finally get some peace through Solomon. You have David that comes in. You know what I mean? After, well, this is David comes in after just generations. I think Judges was another like 400 years or something like that,
Yeah,
where it's
it's
just
a lot of years.
constantly. I mean, the most common thing I think I read through there, it's like, and then Israel sinned against God again. Israel was
Again.
like, well, it's just a common theme through all of Judges. It's just where generation after they'd have a generation here that would be, great, would be devoted to God, and then it was just that quick that they'd fall back away. They have all these other gods around them. There's all kinds of connections with this and stuff too, as far as Joshua not fully exterminating all the people that the offspring of the Nephilim and all the ites, like you said,
Right.
all these people that were devoted to destruction, these different people groups that were, complete.
They,
Heiser
they
talks
were
about this a
governed
lot.
by the divine council, by those gods, those other nations.
Exactly. And that's what Heiser talks about this a lot.
Yeah.
He says this will be an unseen realm territory. He talks a little bit about it in unseen realm, but he said that he's going to get more eventually when he ends up writing the second book. He said this is a big focus he wants to focus on, is that all these people groups are connected back to the divine council, the
Right.
divine when the nations got scattered, they're connected to the Nephilim in Genesis 6:1-4 and
Hey,
stuff.
and we'll talk about that another session about the
Yeah,
divine council, maybe. But
that's a
hey, I
whole
want to
nother
say
thing.
something, Nathan,
Yeah,
about Israel now. And your story, you're telling a story, and God desired to have a bride, or that was his whole intent. You and I have talked about this. So why do you want land? What was the promised land? It was us. It was God's people to have offspring, that God desired to have his offspring
you're
through his
getting you're
bride
getting ahead.
Israel.
You're getting ahead of it. You're
Okay,
getting
okay.
ahead of it.
Sorry.
That's what we're getting to.
All right. Well,
Because right
uh,
now, that was the promised land, was the promised space. It was a sacred. He wanted to establish a sacred space. It was kind of a reestablishment of just a little section of the Garden of Eden, but not actually the Garden of Eden, because
right.
God, you know what I mean. Nothing been perfected, you know, because so God's still living within his tabernacle. He's not free to roam
Yeah, he's
outside
still
of
in the
the
box.
tabernacle.
Right.
Yeah, per se. Yeah, exactly. He's still in the box. That's a good way to put it, because, you know, and that has to do with the cleansing. It has to do with, you know what I mean, just the earth in itself, with Israel's state of mind, the state of the earth. But anyway, so that's the whole goal at the point. But the ultimate goal, and that's why, you know, they keep calling out to God, and God would keep coming back. He'd say when he could stand it no more, you know what I mean, when through judges and stuff like that, he
Yeah.
finally rose somebody else to judge. So they get to Saul. That wasn't God's plan either, for them to have a king over his land. He didn't want that, even a nation of
Right.
priests. So that's what they wanted. So he gave them what they wanted. And then through all that, you know, you end up getting David, who, if you read through, you know, David's trek through Samuel and through the Psalms and stuff, you'll see that David, you know, God calls him the man after his own heart, because not because it's because he saw God in a way that most, if you know, there might not have been anybody else before him that thought or saw God in, you know, the characteristics of God, saw God for who God really was, and he tried to rule with the same way. Like every situation, you can see so many different ways that he judged people or places and stuff in the nature of how God would do it, you know, or didn't do this or didn't do that. He wouldn't touch Saul because Saul was, you know, he could have killed Saul, but he refused to do it because he feared God enough, because he said God anointed him. So he said, if God wants to do that, he said, that's on God. That's not for me to do. He said that's an absolute, like, brilliant way of, I mean, that's the way, I mean, because we,
That's God's
even in
heart.
ourselves,
That's
well, yeah,
God's heart.
even in ourselves, like now we think that, well, you know, this person did me wrong or did this against me
I'll
or
never
something.
talk to him
So
again.
now, yeah, you say, well, if I keep doing this, if I keep loving them, if I keep showing them kindness, they're
Yeah,
not going to learn their lesson. So
that's
I
right.
need to take this away from them, or I need to stop doing this so that they learn their lesson. And that's not it. You know, David said, he said, God, if it's for you, and this paraphrasing, but he's like, if it's for you to take care of them, you take care of them. He said, I
Yeah.
won't lay a hand on him because he's been anointed by you, so I'm not going to lay a hand on him. And he
Hey,
even goes
listen.
so far to,
Well, here, I want to say this about David. It wasn't what David was to do stood out. It was who David was,
yep,
who David is. It wasn't what he did. It was who he was. And I think
yeah.
that's important because he had the heart of God. He was the God in him stood out. It wasn't all the stuff he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's it's he just, yeah, he had a different mindset on how he viewed God, and he
Yeah.
made it a purpose to try and rule as God would do. So anyway, we're getting off topic again, but anyway, so you got all of Israel as a nation. You got David that gets raised up and everything. And then after that, you know, Solomon comes in. It's the first time they actually find a little bit of rest. They actually enter into God's rest in the land for the life of Solomon,
Yeah.
even though Solomon ended up doing all kinds of horrible stuff and everything like that. But, you know, it was a time of peace because of where they were at and stuff. But then
Yes.
after that, it completely unfolded after that. And they went to, you know, the nation split up between the northern region, the southern region, and they were all, you know, it just says, you know, like they were sinning against God like none of their fathers ever had before them, you know, all the different gods that they were serving and stuff. And it just quickly just kept just unfolding worse and worse and worse till they got taken over and stuff. But all throughout the time, the same thing just keeps happening over and over and over, because it's easy just to see all that, the circumstances and stuff. But the amazing part through it all is to see God, especially through Isaiah, through Jeremiah. The whole book of Jeremiah is about it. And, you know, when they're getting ready to be taken over by, I think by that point it's Babylon. Jeremiah's talking
Yeah, it was
to
Babylon.
Judah, I think. And I think at that point, I think Israel's already gotten taken over by Syria. But the whole time, it's God completely reaching out over and over and over, reaching out, telling them to come back to me. Even when he gives them warnings, he's saying, I'm going to empower these nations to take over you. They are going to destroy you, and you're no longer going to be a nation. and then he turns right back around. But come back to me, and I'll stop all this. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
I
He's like,
love
come
you
back.
that
He
much.
just keeps on. He keeps on saying, and it's just like he talks about it over and over about how you've been unfaithful to me. It's constantly. It's you know, you look at God. He's the spouse that is constantly being cheated on, and he just keeps on reaching. He still keeps on.
He never
He
stops
he
loving them.
Yeah, he holds on to this hope of redemption to bring them back because
Yes,
he knows that there's more to it than what they're not living to who their true nature. There's more to them themselves that they're you know what I mean uh, they're not living up to their potential kind of
they
thing.
can't
You know,
see it. Yeah, they can't see it.
yeah there's a deep they could have such a better bond if they would just choose him and stay in him and be faithful to him. The relationship and the ultimate thing, you know, the ultimate relationship, the benefits would be so much more because they don't see what's about to happen either,
Right.
because they keep saying, you know, God makes the promises to David that a son's going to come from your line, you know, this king with this, you know, everlasting kingdom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They still don't understand what this is. You know what I mean? It's just this is the birth of this idea, this Messiah idea that comes in and it's starting to evolve, and it
Right.
just keeps on, it starts snowballing from there. But that's what, when you get to it, that's what, like I said, when I got to this Malachi thing and I was thinking about all this, and this is what it all was. The whole plan from the get-go with Israel was to, oh, we forgot to read the part on Malachi, the actual verse in Malachi that took me over there to, you said about the godly offspring. I forgot to read that. In
Yeah.
Malachi 2:15, that's what we should have read this first. It said,
Go
but
ahead.
2:15, it says God's talking to, or I think Malachi is talking at this point. He's talking to God or Malachi, I can't remember, but they go back and forth where he's talking to talking to the leaders and stuff like that, the leading people. This is I think in Judah, but he's talking to and telling them, you know what I mean? It's like everything he's saying, you guys did this and this, because in their eyes at this time, before they got taken over, they're thinking that, you know, they're still God's favored people. God's not
Oh
going to turn
yeah,
away
yeah.
from
They're
them.
into themselves.
Even in all the warnings and stuff, they're like, no, God will be with us. We're his chosen people, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's what he says, and it goes
Verse 15.
and yeah, 15, starting with 13, it says, and this is the second thing you do. You cover the altar of the Lord with tears, with weeping and crying, so he does not regard the offerings anymore, nor receive it with good will from hands. Yet you say, for what reason? And he says, and that's what they keep saying through all these things. God's given examples, and they keep saying, for what? What did we do? We didn't do anything. Like, you know, they don't understand it. But he says, because the Lord has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, with whom you have dealt treacherously. It says, yet she is your companion and your wife by covenant. It says, but did he not make them one, having a remnant of the Spirit, or a portion of the Spirit? He says, and why one? He seeks godly offspring. So he's talking about the wives, you know what I mean, the people and their wives and stuff. He's given an illustration of marriage and what marriage is all about. This is the secret. When I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is after everything compounding, as far as what I was talking about earlier, what Jesus said, you don't understand what's in the scriptures. And he says, it wasn't so from the beginning. This is the whole thing. He says, and why? He says, you know, he was the witness. He was the witness over your union, you and your wife, talking about, you know what I mean, the people and the men and their wives. He was there to witness, and to be a witness was a big thing in this time period. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It solidified stuff. But he said he was the witness, and then not only that, he says, but that was your companion or helper. He says your wife by covenant. So you're making an everlasting covenant with this person you're
That's a
uniting.
promise, it's called.
Yep, and you're an everlasting covenant and a bond that you're. And then it says, and that having a remnant of the Spirit, he's bonding them with a portion or a remnant of the Holy Spirit. So not only, I mean, this is just the
Yes.
depth of this because we don't understand just the how important and the sanctity of marriage and how important and powerful it really is. But he's saying he's personally the witness over these two unions, and you guys are making an everlasting covenant forever. You know, not just
Yeah.
till it falls apart and then, you know, you move on to somebody else or something. this is a covenant forever. And he says, not only that, but then he's bonding them. And this is Old Testament too. This isn't New Testament talk where we've already been given the Holy Spirit. So then he's bonding them with a portion of the Holy Spirit, that these two are bonded forever. And he says, and for what reason? Because he seeks godly offspring. So
Right.
that the children, because the initial call from the beginning was to flourish and it was to rule and what's the exact wording? The not repopulate, but to
Multiply. It says multiply, but that's a godly offspring. It says go and
but
multiply throughout the earth.
huh? Yeah, it's to rule my yeah. I was just drawing a blank on the exact wording, but our whole call was to have dominion over the earth and multiply.
Right.
And so I mean, so that's what it's saying here. I mean, this was the culmination of everything. Seeing this was the godly offspring, because I'd never seen that written in anywhere else through the word or anything. He says,
Right.
and for what reason? For godly offspring. So as we multiply, as we, take dominion over the earth, as we multiply, this was the initial thing of Adam and Eve. He pulled them
Right.
apart from each other, but also, with this portion of the
That
spirit
was
to have
God's
godly
original
offspring.
plan.
That was God's original plan.
Right.
So through all this saying all that, now we should have said that from the beginning. I forgot.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
tried
Well,
to
we're
chime
okay.
in. Yeah, you tried to chime in. I forgot to say that. But anyway, so you go back and link. So God marries himself to Israel. So why does he marry himself to Israel? What would be the point of a marriage? He's not the father right now, but the point of the marriage,
Is
after
to have
reading this
offspring.
verse, is for the godly offspring. And who was God's godly offspring? That's what through the line of David, one will be given and everything. So the godly offspring then is Jesus.
That's right.
Jesus becomes he becomes the offspring of God in Israel,
Now,
because Jesus was through the line of Israel. Even though they rebelled and rebelled and rebelled and rebelled, the whole point of Israel as a nation and God marrying Israel as a nation was that he would have an offspring. He would have his, the son through the line of David, through the line all the way back, traced all the way back to Abraham, the original covenant.
right.
And through that whole line, the reason for marrying Israel as a nation was for the godly offspring, which was the offspring of himself. This was
And
the plan from all the way back here.
and let me connect this also. We're going to get into that New Testament part of it, but we got to start seeing Israel as the bride of God, because, like you said, they were married. Israel did everything else, but they were married to God because God loved them so much, and His whole desire was to have His offspring through Israel, the
That was the
bride.
whole thing. The whole thing was, and at this point, through as it started crumbling here and there and everything like that, the whole reason God still kept calling, like I said, the books of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and stuff. God keeps trying to call them back. He's already
Yeah,
got David. He's already got the line going and everything. He already had Abraham. He already has everything. Has already
it's
happened
in place.
in the on the timeline, like that, as far as generational and everything. Everything's already going to happen. Jesus, it's already set in motion.
Right.
Jesus is going to happen. He's going to come from these lines. His whole purpose of trying to call back Israel now is not to, he's already got Jesus coming.
Yep.
His whole purpose is to try and call Israel back into it so that they can enjoy the blessing of the birth. So that the Jews, like when Jesus does come, they can enjoy in the blessings as well. But it doesn't go that way. But that
Hey,
was the whole.
hey Nathan, even to this day, He still calls Israel because we are grafted in to Israel. In other words, as the believers. And, I know that's another subject, but even today, he still loves Israel.
Well, that's because that's what he never moved on.
That's
Even
right.
like we said, Jeremiah 3:4, or I think it was in not 3:4, but I think it was in chapter 3 or chapter 4. I can't remember the exact one, but it's somewhere right in there. But he even says he gave Israel a certificate of divorce. And then he turns right around like he's saying he's
Yeah.
so fed up. He's like, and that was the way of things, you know what I mean? Back then, you give them the man can give a certificate of divorce for
Yeah.
sexual immorality, or there's a whole debate about that, or any other thing. But that's what
Turns right around.
Yeah, he says, I gave Israel a certificate of divorce, and Judah, her sister, just still didn't take that as a warning, or blah blah blah. But then he turns right back around and he calls them back again. Like, even though he's like I'm divorcing you, he's like, but I still want you. Come back to me. If you'll just come back to me, all this stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, you can still be a nation. Everything that is already in process. Everything is already going. I want you to come back and enjoy this blessing that's coming. But and so they can't see past that. But even till today, just like you're saying, he's still in love with. I mean, but it's a little different because Israel, because with the new covenant and stuff, like we'll
Yeah,
talk
sure.
about that in a second. Where
Well,
with
it's
the
the
new covenant,
combination, the oneness. He
yeah,
becomes
but
the
it's just
oneness.
that. Yeah, because we get, grafted in through adoption and everything like that, because
Right.
that was another part, of the whole plan and everything like that. And it's littered all through there. If you know what you're looking for, and when you're reading it, it'll stand out like once you start learning to read all this, you start reading through it and you'll see it all littered through the Old Testament, this new covenant thought, and this thought of God's ultimate plan about bringing the nations back into his a covenant with him, bringing all the nations back together. But anyway, so you get the whole purpose of God's union with Israel was to have the godly offspring, which was
Yes.
Jesus. So their covenant, even though it was a failed marriage, it was a success because God got what he needed from Israel. What he needed from Israel was Jesus. Jesus
Right.
to be born, which was himself incarnate through Jesus, born through the line of David, through the line all the way back to Abraham. So
Yep.
this had to be had because this fulfills the promise, and this fulfills everything along the way by all this happening. So then Jesus comes on to the scene, and then, like I said, I told you this, the one right there in Matthew 3, and it's talking about John the Baptist, and he's baptizing and everything like that. And the very first declaration that is made in the four Gospels, the very first, right in the New Testament, the very
Yep.
beginning of the New Testament, and um, it says the very first declaration that is made. Let's see, where are we at?
John the Baptist.
Yeah, John the Baptist is talking and everything like that. But then it says when Jesus came to him and he baptized Jesus. So Jesus answered him, the spitting verse, fill the righteousness. Oh, okay. Then he allowed him. Says when he had been baptized, Jesus came up immediately from the water, and behold, this is Matthew 3:16.
Yep.
When he came out of immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting upon him. It says, and suddenly a voice came from heaven saying, "This is my beloved
Beloved
Son, in
son.
whom I am well pleased." So the very first declaration, I mean, we see God talking through the prophets all through the Old Testament and everything.
Yes.
And you don't get any more of that after this, because it's all through Jesus. But
Yep.
the very first declaration, the very first thing that God says now, he says, "This is my beloved son." All of a sudden, he's become a father.
Yes.
And they started doing, like I said,
And
this
there's his
transition.
offspring. And
Exactly.
Jesus
And
is
that's
his
this
offspring.
and this transition of this mindset of God becoming the Father, like I said, I've been seeing it like a lot more. It's through the transition leading up to Jesus. It's becoming that way. But he declares, the very first thing he declares, and I don't know if God the Father says anything else. I don't think he does. Like, about thinking about it through all the New Testament, everything's through Jesus. You know what I mean? Through Jesus's mouth
Yeah.
and everything. But the very first thing he declares is, "This is my beloved son." So all of a sudden he's declaring his fathership to his beloved son. So now it becomes like it fulfills, like we said, that whole point of Israel is now fulfilled and completed. And so now we have the son. And then we jump forward. Did you want to jump in or anything? Because I was
Hold
just
it.
gonna
Here's what I want to do, Nathan. We're running a little short on time. I think maybe we ought to stop this segment and the next segment pick it up from here to go. Or no?
it's almost finished. I hate doing that. The because trying to get back into this where it was at and everything.
Well,
It
go
would just
ahead and keep
hurry
going
up and
for
just
the
hurry
next
up
few
and finish
minutes,
it.
anyways.
Yeah, just hurry up and finish. It's the whole purpose now. So now you got Jesus on the scene and everything. Jesus comes through. He comes with this whole new covenant and everything, which is you know what I mean. It's a covenant of the heart, and he comes in with all these new teachings and stuff, which is just a shift. It's all like it's an updated version. It's an updated version of well, we sometimes we look at it as an updated version of law, and we look at it as things that we need to accomplish and
Uh,
stuff, but really he's coming in and he's given an illustration of what this kingdom of heaven looks like. He's bringing in, he has a new goal now.
He's
God's
telling
goal with his God's
no, he's
goal with
telling
his
the story. He's telling the story of the kingdom of God and the heart of God now. See, he's just continuing. The offspring is carrying the same message that God did in the Old Testament about the kingdom of God into the new.
Well, now, yeah. So now you got a whole different view. No, though he's coming with a whole different message that's so much more internal. It's taken everything that was in the law and now he's flipping it upside down. He's saying, you know what I mean? If you even talk slanderous about a person, you've murdered him in your heart.
Right.
You're like, what the heck? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
It's like if you even look at somebody lustfully, you've committed adultery in the heart. You're like, what the? You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
all
yeah.
this seems so bizarre, but it's taking everything that they know and now saying he's putting it in a whole different spin because now his whole goal is to apply what he brings. He has a new mission, and it's with with the kingdom of heaven. Like just like when Jesus comes in, what is he then geared towards? He calls the church. You know what I mean? His church is his people. His church becomes his
Yeah,
bride.
that's
So
right.
he comes in, he established, or he's teaching about this whole new kingdom and everything. But now he's got all this talk about his people, about the church, his church, and he refers himself as the bridegroom, and that his church is going to be
That's
the
right.
bride. So now all of a sudden, so you had God was the husband, and Israel was the bride, and for what purpose? To
Right.
create the godly offspring, which was Jesus. So now you have grown Jesus, and he's teaching and everything, and now he's declaring himself as the bridegroom. Now
Right.
he, just like his father like son, now he wants to be the bridegroom. So
And he
now
wants us, the church, to be the bride.
and he's claimed, yeah, just as God claimed Israel as the people, now he's claimed the church, which is, like I said, this is the fullness of the church. He's speaking in terms of the now, like while he's walking and everything, but he's talking about, you know what I mean, the kingdom of heaven as a whole, the church within the kingdom of heaven, which is linked to all these passages about the
Yes.
nations coming together and everything. But he's talking about, so now he wants to be the bridegroom to the church.
Yes.
And so it's like, so now, like I said, like father, like son, now Jesus, he's putting himself as the bridegroom to be married to the church. So, but why would he have that talk? Why would he jump back into that talk, that marriage, that covenant marriage talk again? It's to create godly offspring.
Offspring. That's right. There's the
Uh,
key. If you
so that,
remember anything in this video, if anybody remembers anything, please remember God wanted his offspring, which was Jesus from the Old Testament, to the church, have an offspring in the New Testament. If I hear
yeah,
anything,
so,
hear the
well,
offspring.
well, that's not even. It goes further because just like God was the bride, or God was the bridegroom in the
Bridegroom.
Old Testament. Israel was the bride. It created Jesus. Now Jesus is the bridegroom. The church is the bride. But now through that union, because now you have a perfect God in human form. You know what I
Right.
mean? You had God the Father, who was the head of that union, with
Right.
Israel, the lesser, the lesser human, just the human, but the lesser of the two, and through that created the perfect God in human form. The perfect God. So now you have the perfect God in Jesus in human form with the lesser, the church, which is the lesser of the two unions. But he's saying it's going to be a church of without spot and wrinkle. This
Yes.
church that learns of, as we learn of the kingdom of heaven, this is going to be a church without spot and wrinkle. So through the union of the two, now you're going to have a new holy offspring. And what is that holy offspring going to be? It's going to be the fullness of the kingdom of God, and it's going to be, this is the big thing, this is going to be the redemption of the earth. The
Yes.
offspring of Jesus and his church is going to be the redemption of the earth, which is crazy how it sounds that
No.
you would have the earth as an offspring, but that's
No,
exactly what it's going to be.
it doesn't sound crazy when you start putting the New Testament scriptures together, like you said about the kingdom. It says in Romans, Apostle Paul wrote this. He says, all creation, right now, all
Hmm.
creation is waiting for or it's groaning, it says, for the manifestations or the visible, tangible things, the manifestations of the sons of God.
Yep, the
Okay,
church.
which is a demonstration of his kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven.
Exactly. And that's what it's going to be like. I like the final thing that like it came to me the other day. I was thinking on this or talking, I can't remember. But if you think about it, it's a full circle too, because it's not as crazy as it sounds. Because what were
Right.
we originally, the man Adam, what was he originally created from? It was
The
the
dirt, the
dust of the
dust.
earth, and
Yeah.
God's
Yep.
breath, and the dust of the earth. So we have the dust of the earth. As crazy as it sounds, too,
Yeah.
we are connected with this earth. We were
Yes.
meant to rule this earth. The earth is in our DNA.
That's
We
exactly
are
right.
in the earth is within us, but also the breath of God. So now this union, you know what I mean. So that this new creation, the new heaven or the new heaven and the new earth, but the new earth, this is going to be the offspring. It's going to, you know what I
Yeah.
mean. It is part of our DNA just as much as the breath of God. And now this holy union is going to be the new creation, which
Hey,
is that's the full thing that I wanted to share
yeah.
with all that.
Well,
But it's
let me read.
go
No,
ahead.
I was going to say you're right. That is the fullness of. I want to read back in Ephesians 27 again, what
Oh
you
yeah,
already.
yeah. You said about that. I forgot about that.
It says here in verse 27 of Ephesians chapter 5. This is quoted by the end times. Everybody thinks, this is going to happen, but I want, in the context of what you just said and what we're saying, it says, talking about Jesus, that he might present her to himself, which is Jesus, a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she, the church, should be holy, listen to this, and without blemish. It says holy, and it says that she should be holy and without blemish. The only way that can happen or was to happen was when Jesus ascended and he put Holy Spirit in each one of us, each one of his offsprings to formulate the bride that
Yep.
that he always desired to have.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that was the whole new covenant when Jesus left. That what much did before on. Like I said, it was a portion. You know what I mean? A portion of the stuff. God connected His bride with a portion of the Spirit. Oh, Jesus, with leaving, He gave us the fullness of the Spirit. And what did He call it too? He called it helper. Just like
Yeah,
the beginning when
yeah,
God said He created woman as a helper.
yes,
Jesus is the fullness of the Spirit as a helper. And it's the
yeah,
fullness of the bond between us and them. And like you said, even if you read all everything you read before that, it's talking about marriage and about how a woman should love her husband and a husband should
yes.
love her wife and everything. And that's what he's going on. Even Paul and even a little further, and we were just reading in 532. He well
Oh, I lost you. You still there? What happened? You
you
still
still there?
there? I lost you.
Yeah. I don't know what happened there.
That's all right. Just finish up here.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Like this is just the last statement, but it says even at the bottom of that, it says it back in Genesis. He's repeating about coming. He says this is a great mystery, but I speak concerning to Christ and the church. So
Yes,
even Paul sees this as as the significance of this concept of marriage and just how the sanctity of marriage and how it's interwoven. It says, this is the mystery between Christ and the church. This is the mystery. Everything we just talked about, this is the mystery of
Yes,
just,
that's
what I mean,
awesome.
of one of the awesome mysteries. I mean, just really connects it all because we've even said it before, like we talked about it before, like so many people devote their lives to this end times, you know what I mean, the signs of the
Yeah,
end times and everything like that. But I can promise you that the end times is not going to be tomorrow. You know why? Because the fullness of the church has not arrived yet. You know what I
that's
mean?
right.
We're
That's
we're
right.
not the church. We're not the church without spot or wrinkle yet. We're not the
Yes.
church that's ready to give birth to new creation. You
Yeah,
know
to
what I
have
mean? It's all,
dominion over all the earth.
and then we'll get into we can talk a little bit more about this later. We can end there because there's still
Yeah.
something there's something I read today was on the it was the last two books of Isaiah that connects all this stuff and everything too. But we can
Let,
talk further on
yeah,
this
let's
later.
save that. Let's save that to our next time. But this has been great, Nathan. I think you did a great job on laying the story out, and I hope those who watch this can follow and understand. We're not Bible scholars by any
No,
means, but
the,
we are the sons of God in the
the
sense
connections are
of
there.
that we're part of the bride and his offspring. So God is showing, I'm older, a lot older than you, but he's showing old guys and new and young guys the same
Hey,
thing.
I
All
just
those who are hunger and thirst for it. You know what I'm saying? Not just not just go with the same old stuff.
No, because it's still about us doing. That's why, like we're talking, like I said, about the end times and stuff. It's
Yeah.
not about waiting to see a sign or anything.
No.
It's the works. Our works now are. I've said this before. Our works are in finding understanding, finding wisdom, and learning to walk in it and stuff. But our works are now preparing ourselves, preparing our church, getting the church to the place. I mean, it should be like our avid, like just desire to get the church to the place where Jesus is ready to return. Where I mean, that
Yeah.
should be our hope. Our hope should be in the restoration of the earth, where evil is expelled. I mean, like you know what I mean. We
Right.
should be to the point where we're tired of just seeing death and destruction and hurt and pain of every. I mean, from the innocent children to
Right.
you know what I mean, the people in your lives that I mean, all the suffering that doesn't unnecessary suffering that every one single one of us go through. I mean, we should be tired of it. And
Yeah.
we're not just. I mean, we sit back and say, "Oh, Jesus is going to come." Jesus, no, it's our. He's waiting for us. It's not in that. You know what I mean? That allotted time is going to come when we're ready, and
Yeah.
it's us in getting there. Like you know what I mean? I'd like to share that dream that I told you about ringing the bell.
Yeah.
Not today, but that'll be
No.
a different thing
Listen, I
in
just
the
wrote
future.
some things down. I think we ought to conclude here, but I think we have a lot to talk about. Like you said, he's waiting for us. Not so much that we have to do anything. All we have to start is being who he desires
Well,
us to be. You know?
encourage the church. Encourage the church. That's what this is about. This is just us talking because, like you said, we're not Bible scholars or anything, but we're
Right.
gaining these understandings. So share it with each other. Teach
Yeah.
each other to grow in these understandings and seek out the understandings in themselves so that the church becomes ready. So
Yeah.
that the church becomes, you know what I mean? There's still so much more stuff to this as far as, a new harvest coming and everything like that.
Hey,
But
son. Son, I was gonna say you can't wipe your mouth with your shirt all the time, okay?
I always do.
I know
It's
you do.
better than wiping it on your hands.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, well, listen. Okay, man, we're gonna pick this up next on our next segment. But as for now, again, um, one of our desires. I'll just say this, Nathan. We're hoping that other people will hear this down the road and join us, right? And
Yeah,
join
yeah,
us in our conversation.
yeah. Get a Zoom thing.
Yeah, that's
Get
what
us
I
all
mean.
in
But
there.
that might be 100 years from now. But anyways,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
yeah. But uh, I think we will pick this up if it's okay with you next time. Okay.
All right, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll get into different. So I'm sure this will all be peppered, through a lot of the other conversations we have from
Yeah.
here on out. So we'll
All right,
keep on
man.
going.
Hey, I'm gonna stop our recording. I'll give you a call in a minute.
All right, love you.
All right, love you too, man.